Ankur, welcome to DeKoder Conversations.
Thank you so much.
Really lovely to have you here.
I love this setting already. Thank you so much for having me.
Ankur, you are a serial entrepreneur, you are a content creator, you're an educator, and a best-selling author. Now, since we figured when you're coming here, we thought we'll do something different instead of a podcast. We have a group of Gen Z warriors with us today, and we thought they all come from different backgrounds. They've had different learnings, and they have different perspectives to a lot of the things that you teach. So we thought it might be interesting to have their questions directed towards you.
Love it.
Today on some of the things that you talk about, right? So I'll quickly introduce you to the team. To my left here, it's Gayatri. Gayatri is here. Now she's the skeptic of the group. I think her thing is she's trying to figure out, is there a point of finding purpose in life when there's so much chaos that's happening in the world, right? There is Vrinda on my right here. She's the extrovert of the group, and she's trying to figure out what's the difference between people-pleasing and being a people's person. We have Nilakshi here on my left. Now, Nilakshi, she says that she is self-aware. Nilakshi is self-aware as a person, but she's trying to figure out what's the difference between personal happiness and personal ambition. And we have Himani here. She is the lost one of the group, and she's trying to find out more about herself. And then we have Parth. Parth is always curious as a person, and he's curious about life, people, and the world. And I think he wants to ask you questions from that perspective. So do you guys want to start throwing questions at him, or do you want me to set the base a little bit?
Sure, set the base.
Okay, cool. I think one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, Ankur, is about relationships, right? And I think more than asking a question about you, I think the first question that we want to talk about is actually a question around Shaurya. Now, for those who are not familiar with Shaurya, Shaurya is your colleague. He's 25 years old, and in all conventional ways, he's fairly very successful, right? He earns an 8-figure now. He's just gifted his father a BMW at the age of 25, so he's doing very, very well. But you also say that he wasn't the best of himself in the last 4 years, right? He wanted to get into IIT, attempted twice, didn't do well. And I think that was his dream and his father's dream as well. But today, cut to 4 years, he's doing fantastically well. But then you mentioned that he lost his cat. And that's all it took for him to come to you and say that, Ankur, I'm willing to start all over it again if it takes for me to get my cat back. What do you think that tells us about relationships, love, and what truly matters to us as human beings?
It's such a fascinating start. There was a reason I started the book with this story, because I am not a pet person at all. I frankly do not, while it's a politically incorrect thing to say, I can't relate to pet parents.
Yeah.
And I can't relate why you would love an animal more than you could love humans.
Right.
But when I saw that happen to Shaurya, and he's a very objective guy, he loves numbers, he's just data-driven and all of that, it almost comes as if he's emotionless. And he's sobbing, he's sitting on the floor, he's like, I've lost, the cat's name is Kittu. I've lost Kittu, I don't know if she'll ever come back. And I'm willing to go down to that day when I didn't make it to IIT and I felt like an absolute failure and I didn't know whether my life will ever work out or not, and willing to relive my life all over again if I were to get her back. It just told me what I have come to believe all along, that relationships is frankly everything that it boils down to. The reason why we all show up, of course, it's money, but at the end of it, it's trying to prove in some way a meaningful existence towards our own self, towards the people that we care about, towards showing that we matter, towards showing that they matter. And at the end of it, everything is about people. And as much as you would have AI and as much as you would have a world created in virtual reality and blah, blah, I don't think this innate thing is ever going to go away, which is we are ultimately people and we are all about people. And money and everything else is frankly just a segue to that somehow.
Wow. Gayatri.
So building off of what you said, how does one actually live a full life, or what is the point of life? Like, I feel like the world is always telling young people so many contradictory things, that be giving but put yourself first, think about the future but live in the moment. So how should we navigate issues like this?
The first thing is, which is what the book was, you cannot live life without winning over people, because ultimately when you win over people, and not by force, but by trust, by consistency, and so on, you make life easier for you. But in the process, you cannot afford to lose yourself. And unfortunately, the world that we have all been raised in, certainly your parents were, is that you have to be all submissive. Particularly women have been told you have to put somebody else first. You have to feed the family before you feed yourself. You have to wake up before everyone else wakes up. You have to get the house ready before the house shows up to be ready for itself. You have to sacrifice your career, your life, to be able to have somebody else go through their career, their life. And that's just ingrained, and it becomes conditioning over years and years and years, to the point where they believe that that is the right way to live. And in some way, they justify that. They're like, you know what, I find so much happiness in the fact that I am sacrificing for somebody else's life, and I go to bed sleeping really well, knowing that my life is worthy because somebody else's life is better because of mine. And that sounds really, really nice until they perhaps reach their deathbed, and there is just layers and layers and years of regret where they wish they had lived for themselves. And it's fascinating. I don't know if you've heard of this. There was this nurse who was stationed at the hospice where she was just attending to people who were terminally sick and were about to just go. And she wrote this fascinating book, I forget the name of the book, where she was like, these are the 5 things that consistently people who went kept saying. And number 1 was, I wish I had listened to myself more than I did. And that basically means they just lost themselves. They just lost themselves in the entire journey. So when people tell you, this is the way to live life, they're basically telling you, this is the way that I have lived life. They're not telling you this is the right way of living life. This is saying, this worked out for me. And I don't have any other choice, by the way. So I can't even give you another alternative. Like a doctor will maybe a doctor will actually. A doctor will say, it's a great noble profession to be in. Every day when you go to bed, you know that you save someone's life. But if you really ask them, maybe they'll be like, you know what, it's too hard of a life. And maybe if I have kids, I'll tell them, don't be doctors. While I would love for them to be doctors because it comes with a grander purpose, just don't be doctors. You're better off being engineers or lawyers or something slightly easier than this. And that's the same thing that the parents are. They wish they can tell you, go and live your life. Don't care about anybody else. Don't care about anything. Certainly not people's opinions. Draft a life for yourself. You will falter, you will fail, but you will navigate and learn from your mistakes. But do not pander to anybody else. Just listen to yourself. But they haven't done that all their lives. So they have no right to say that. And it almost comes from a hypocritical point of view, which is why they will never tell you that. And they'll be much rather, no, listen to others, listen to your elders, listen to so on. I tell them, which is what I will tell you, is use elders as a bouncing board for things you haven't experienced yet. Don't think of it as the gospel. Don't think of it as God's word. Just think of it as somebody who's experienced life more than you have. So maybe they've seen something that you haven't, and dig them on that. Like, if I do make this journey, what's likely to happen? Just tell me your thoughts. They needn't be right or wrong. I just want to hear. And if you speak to as many people as you can who are more experienced, you'll just get points of view, but you decide what you want to do. वो हिंदी में कहावत है ना, सुनो सबकी करो खुद की. That's exactly what I would say.
Thank you.
You know, based on what you just said right now also, that you say in your book that the toughest part of life is actually people and your relationships. And I'm interested in interpersonal relationships and how, you know, one can strengthen them. But I was wondering, what do you think, or how can the other in your life play a role in building your own self-confidence? Do you think there is a relationship between these two things?
There certainly is. I think we are all influenced by the company we keep. And certainly, if it's your partner, if it's your close friend, even if they are your parents, the kind of relationship that they have is going to meaningfully impact the relationship you have with yourself. I have found, in my own personal experience, the strongest, the right word would be the most healthy relationships that I've had, where I've genuinely felt that the other side is invested in me, is when they have not tried to prescribe anything. They've not told me, ye karo, ye karo, ye karo. They've not told me this is right, this is wrong. They've simply said, do your thing, and even if it doesn't work out, I'm always going to be here. And that's the confidence that you need. I'll take you to 3 Idiots. All seen it? Last scene. Farhan speaking to his dad. He's not saying, please allow me the permission to become a photographer. He's not saying, I know that I'm a kick-ass photographer and I'll just rock it. He's not saying, oh, I hate you for not allowing you to be one, blah, blah, blah. He's basically saying, I know that I'm not going to earn as much as others. I know that I'll not have a house as big as theirs. I know that I will not earn as much money as I am. But I want to do this, and I just want you to be happy with what I do. What I love about that conversation, which I don't think too many people read into it the way that I did, is he was asking his dad permission to fail. He was saying, I most likely will fail at this in the quintessential definition of the world's definition. But I just want you to know that even if I fail, you'll still be proud of me and treat me like your son. And if you give me that confidence, I will crush it. And that's all that it took. That's all that it took. So the best relationships you will have are not the ones that will tell you this. They'll just be like, do your thing. We don't know any better. But you will never do anything that will make us not believe in you. Go out and do it. And then when you have that, then the rest of the world doesn't matter.
So in our world, connections has become a buzzword. We go to events to make connections. We want a job through connections, get some work done through connections. Now, what that essentially means is that, we are viewing other people as means to our own end. So do you share my concern about, relationships becoming more contractual, more about, what am I going to gain from the other person?
That is often the starting point. But the way that I've seen this pan out in the real world is all transactional relationships at some point of time fail because they're transactional in nature, and the transaction wasn't coded on paper. It's not like you met me and you're like, hey, at some point in time in the future, I'm going to call you and ask you for a job, and I'm going to do everything in between to impress you so that when I do ask you for a job, you will say yes. Okay, and that's a transaction. We're good? And I'll be like, yeah, we're good. That never happens. So you come in and just try to impress. I get impressed because you are impressive. And at some point in time, you will just assume that that will lead to me saying yes for a transaction that you wanted out of it. But the best relationships are the ones that don't have any such expectation. You're just being yourself, and I will see you for who you are. And because you're good for the purpose that I see in you, I will always say yes, should you just one fine day spring up a conversation. So I've had so many instances where, let's say, youngsters have come in and they're like, Ankur, I'm looking for a job. I'm not sure whether I want to do a full-time or a freelancing gig and so on. And I'm really good with, say, video editing, but I don't know whether that is the right thing for me or not. And because I've been in that person's, let's say, conversation for a while, I know that that person means well, I know that they have right intent and so on. It doesn't take me anything to say, you know what, why don't you try at our place itself? Just see, because I have nothing to lose, you have nothing to lose. And if we find that you are really good with what you claim you are, we might just benefit from it, and so will you. And this happens completely uninitiated. It's not that he sprung up that because he was playing chess in his mind that I will get to that point and ask him to join me. It just happened because he was sharing completely without expectations. And those are the best relationships to build. So I often say this, please connect with people almost on a daily basis with zero expectations of what they can give you back. And you'll be surprised that when you do need something from them, you wouldn't even have to ask, and they'll offer it to you.
Ankur, a lot of things that you just said brings us to our next thing that we wanted to talk about, and that's setting boundaries, right? And you, in your book, which is Winning People Without Losing Yourself, you mention that saying yes is easy, but saying no requires hard work. I wanted to dig a little deeper onto that, because a lot of times saying no to people who you really love is very difficult. It can lead to you losing them, and that's very hard and very difficult to do. Why do you think that it's so important to say no, even if it's at the risk of losing someone you love?
Because when you do say no and you actually end up losing that person was never in a relationship with you. They were in relationship with a version of you that always said yes. And that's just the truth. If you actually stand up for who you are and the other person rejects you for that, you were never in a relationship with the actual self.
Right.
You're just this made up fictional entity who was like, yes, of course, I love you. Of course, I'll be there for you. Of course, this, of course, that, blah, blah, blah. And the minute you actually set up a boundary, which is, I'm sorry, I can't do this today, you were just completely fired. That was the wrong relation. There was never a relationship to begin with. So I often say this, that the best way to test a relationship, not that any one of you should, but the best way to test a relationship is to actually set a boundary. Because if you were to set a boundary and it's not respected, then that relationship didn't exist in the first place. It was a fictional one with a completely fictional character that wasn't you. And that's why I believe it's so important. Now, when you do that, there's a very fine layer between being hurtful when you set a boundary and being true to yourself when you set a boundary. Now, that distinction comes with experience, I'd argue, and I would admit, because it is possible that you do set a boundary that is just hurtful for the other person. Right. Because what you want to do is not really set a boundary for yourself, you just want to test whether that person sticks around or not. So you're titillating them, you're provoking them, which isn't fair, which shouldn't be the way to do that. The boundary is only meant for you and your peace, and it never comes at the expense of somebody else in terms of hurt. It does come at the expense of them getting used to you having that boundary. And if that is not what they're comfortable with, then that relationship wasn't there in the beginning itself.
So, Ankur, as a formal people pleaser, I have one question.
I love it that you're formal. Congratulations on graduating.
Thank you so much. So, I have a question for you. As you said, following on what you just said, how do we set boundaries with ourselves? Because that is the initial point of everything, right? So, how do we set boundaries within ourselves, especially while having fleeting thoughts about everything, be it professional, be it personal? So, how do you do that personally?
And I'm glad that you asked the last part of it. How do I do it? Because I can only answer for myself. The simplest way that I've earned self-respect in my life is to keep the promises that I make to myself. It's the shortest way of doing that. Because if you really think about it, we often break promises with our own selves. We'll be like, I'll wake up at 6 tomorrow. And we don't. I will call my mom tomorrow. And we don't. I will go to the dentist tomorrow. And we don't. I will do this tomorrow. And we don't. So our brain just gets used to saying, you know what, this person just keeps lying. They don't really mean any of the things that they say, or most of the things that they say. So the next time they say something, don't believe it. Because most likely they're not going to follow through. So your conscious thoughts translate into a subconscious layer of not respecting your own thoughts. And that's why we are scared of our own thoughts. Like the biggest thing that I often hear from Gen Zs, and they don't say it because they don't even know what it is to experience it, is they are incapable. Incapable is the word of sitting by themselves for even 5 minutes. Without a book, without a phone, without music, without people, without anything triggering them or stimulating them, or they're just getting used to it. Nothing, just sit with your thoughts, they can't. And the reason they can't is because they're just scared of what comes up. Like, I'm just scared of the thoughts that will emerge and I don't want to face them. So it's just so easy for me to scroll Instagram instead. And I'm just saying the reason for that is because you have not given your own self irrefutable evidence that you mean business. That you, whatever you say, you will hold that to be true. It doesn't need to be the biggest thing. It doesn't need to be, I will scale Mount Everest this year. It will simply be, I will walk for 5 kilometers every day. And just do that. Just do that. Nothing else. People ask me, because we're in this environment, I want to write a book. How do I write a book? I was like, well, for a start, don't write a book. That's the best way to write a book. Because the minute you said, I want to write a book, there's just so much pressure that you will never start. Instead, just write every day. Just write every day. And believe me, in 1 to 2 years, a book will come out. But if you start with writing a book, you will never write a book because it's the most painful commitment to make. And that's true for so many other things as well.
People often say कि we should not seek validation. But let's say कि मैं clueless हूँ and मैं अभी भी अपनी life के experiments कर रही हूँ. ठीक है, तो at this point validation seems almost necessary for me. So how do you make a difference between a healthy validation and not losing yourself?
So the way that I have thought about this is you always need a center in life, and then you need a way to navigate around the center. So the best example that I can give is imagine that there is a rod, उस rod से एक रस्सी है, and उस रस्सी के एक end पे एक गाय है. Now she is quote unquote stuck to the rod, but the rope is her allowance. And your job in life is to make this rope as long as possible so that I can go as far out as possible from the center, but I always have the center. I'll never get lost. Now that center could be a job. For example, you are here right now at DeKoder, and you may say, you know what, this job, and I'm not suggesting that that's true, but this job is not my life, and I don't want to make it my life. But it's a job that pays the bills. It's a job where I get to work with smart people. It's a job where I get to learn my own self, grow, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I am interested in singing, and I think I want to pursue singing. But singing is so random that you don't know whether you'll ever make it in life or not being a singer. So here's what I will do. My center rod is DeKoder, or my job. It is where I always come back to if I get lost. But my singing is my rope. So I will learn how to sing. I will join singing clubs. I will perform live. I will throw myself out into the universe. None of it will be to earn a living. It will simply be to become a good singer. And that's the only thing that matters, because the more and more you invest in becoming a good singer, the longer the rope becomes. And at some point of time, you may find yourself in Florence, part of a singing group, singing an opera, which you never dreamt of. You're not getting paid for that, by the way. It's not going to show up ever again. आपके Instagram पे सिर्फ आप ही और आपके 5 दोस्त ने like किया वगैरह वगैरह. But the confidence you've got is at a different level altogether. And at one point, you'll be like, you know what? I now want to go on Instagram and start to record my songs. Cover. I'm not writing my own songs. I'm not a writer. I'm a singer. तो मैं covers गाऊंगी. And now you're doing it. And you do it for 3 years. You still have the center. And the next thing you know, you've blown up because you're a good singer. Because for years, all that you've done is just devoted yourself to the art, not putting any pressure to make money from it. And you gave it that rope. You gave it that freedom, that allowance. So one day, your side gig will become bigger than your day gig. And at that point of time, throw the day gig out and become the side gig person. And that is how you don't lose yourself while giving yourself that allowance. So I often say this, even in the book, but even otherwise, please keep exploring. A lot of people misread that by, oh, I have to keep changing jobs every year. No, that's not a point be. Hold the center. It's really important for you to have a center in life. But with that center, please extend. Now then people ask me, what does it mean about relationships? So should I have one steady boyfriend and then keep exploring boyfriends? I said, no. Have a steady relationship that you know you can always rely on. The best one of that will be with your own self. So you don't frankly need anybody else. But because you don't need anybody else, you'll actually find meaningful connections all across the world because you have the healthiest relationship with your own self. But if you don't have the healthiest relationship with your own self, you will keep looking for everything that you're missing in life in everyone else. You don't love yourself, you'll keep looking for love from people else. You don't respect yourself, you'll keep looking for respect from others. You don't trust yourself, you'll keep looking for trust from others. Basically, what you don't have, you'll keep looking from others. The center is very important, whatever that center is.
So, a boundary that I was thinking about is an internal one. There's a word that goes around a lot, which is overthinking. And even you talk about overthinking. But it's such a subjective experience, right? Cognitive processes are so subjective. My overthinking could be different from yours. I was wondering if you have a way to tell the difference between overthinking and thinking. And do you think there can be like an objective understanding of such a subjective experience?
I can attempt. And the way that I've thought about this is the following. There is possibility and probability. These are two different words, but let's try and dig in what they mean. When you stepped out today to show up at the DeKoder office, there was a possibility, God forbid, that you will be hit by a bus and never make it. But you still stepped out. That's quite bold of you. And the reason is because while you know that the possibility of it is there, the probability of it is really low. Overthinking is when we assume that the possibility of something equals the probability of it. So you overthink when you think, oh my God, I can get fired from that job, which is a possibility, and you think that the probability of that happening is really high because in your head, you've just confused the two things. Overthinking is when you're like, oh my God, he or she is going to leave me, which is a possibility, and the probability of that is high, and that's why you are overthinking. So overthinking is when we confuse the possibility and the probability. Now, a rational mind, and it's very easy for me to say it, so forgive me when I make this claim. The rational mind will be like, okay, I understand that the possibility of this exists, the possibility of me dying today, the possibility of me getting cheated upon today, the possibility of me getting dumped by my parents today, the possibility of me losing my job today, all of that exists. What's the probability of it? And you rationally decode that in the decoder world, decode that probability. You will arrive more often than not at a probability which is ridiculously low. And that is how your brain gets convinced, the way that it did this morning for you to step out, that I don't need to worry about this, even though there is a possibility of it. Now, as I said, it's very easy for me to say it, but when you're in that moment, it's really, really hard. So often, the best remedy to get out of overthinking is to ask this very simple question. Everything that I'm scared will actually happen. What is the probability of it happening? And be mathematical about it. In fact, ask ChatGPT about it. They will give you a more rational answer than maybe in that moment you can come up with. And that itself will be an input to your brain saying, okay, it's 1%. I don't need to worry about it because 99% I'll be okay.
Ankur, it wouldn't be fair if we don't pick your brain about money.
Okay.
Right? Since we have you here. One of the first places where we start understanding money is probably with maybe family members who are close to us, probably parents, right? And one of the first common few things that you hear is, hey, the moment you get a job, buy a house, get into the EMI trap, right? Then you hear things like mutual funds, you hear SIP, you hear gold bonds, you hear so many other things, and it's just, you're bound to get confused about it because this is not a subject that you're taught in school. We wanted to understand how did your relationship with money actually start, and at what point did you think that, okay, you know what, I have great knowledge about this subject and I really want to share it with people? At what point did that start?
Firstly, I'll correct you. I don't have great knowledge about the subject. In fact, the only reason I share is because I'm terrible with money. And I made so many mistakes that I almost made it my moral obligation to share all of those mistakes and hopefully have people learn from those mistakes so that they don't make it in their life. I had, as you rightly pointed out, a very different understanding of money growing up, which was seeing my parents, witnessing them and how they used it, and that they, for all the wonderful people that they are, were terrible with money. Terrible. My dad, and I recently put up this post for which I got a lot of hate. I said my dad did everything that was classically wrong in the finfluencer world. He took loans when he couldn't afford them. He maxed out his credit cards when he shouldn't have. He optimized for earning more money and doing it in a rapid fashion and not looking for long-term things. He rarely invested. Whenever he invested, they were in not so smart ideas and certainly not good instruments. So the classic mistakes. And I thought that was all okay because you're born in the middle class trap. So your only ambition in life is to escape the middle class curse. And the faster you can do it, the better your life will be. So you ought to take loans because that's escaping the middle class curse. And you ought to overstretch what your capability is. And I did that for the longest time until I realized it wasn't working for me. So as late as I would say 30, 32, 33 years of age, I was living a very different playbook from what I'm living today. I was only much later in life at that point where I realized that all of what I'd learned about money was wrong. And everything that I had done was just so stupid, despite going to the best schools and surrounded by the best people and blah, blah, blah. I just changed and thankfully recovered. I know of so many people who wouldn't have recovered for no fault of theirs because it was just too late. And I wish people were taught about money in the right way. We're almost always taught, particularly at your age that money is the best instrument to buy things. And you can buy that phone, you can buy that car, you can buy that house, you can buy those shoes, you can buy that gear, you can buy those blah, blah, blah. And I argue that the best use of money is actually not to buy things, but to buy you your freedom. Freedom to live life the way you want. Like you want to work in a job or not work in a job, money can give you that freedom. You want to work in Delhi or move to the mountains, money can give you that freedom. You want to work with this person or not work with this person, money can give you that freedom. You want to lead a certain lifestyle, eat a certain diet or not, money can give you that freedom. It does take money. Right? Day before somebody asked, if you're a vegetarian, how do you get 120 grams of protein? And I answered, this is what I do. And somebody said, well, that costs a lot of money. I was like, yes. And I'm so glad that I am privileged enough to be in that spot. But it will be so dumb of me to have money and still be eating McDonald's. Like, that's the dumbest thing that one can do. Because your money should be buying you quality, whether it's in food, whether it's in travel, whether it's a mattress, whether it's an office chair, whether it's anything, have you. And if you're using money to buy your freedom, that is the best use of it. That's how I think about that. And your goal is also to escape this trap. And this trap is very classically laid out for you, which is you'll start earning money and people will be like, you're earning 100, but you ought to earn 500, but you don't own it as yet. So why don't you take 400 from somebody else? Because you will eventually earn 500. And then you spend your life paying that 400 back with your own money, because that's the same money that's parked in that bank that gave you the loan back at a higher rate of interest. It's just ridiculous if you start thinking about it, the way it functions. But we're just so primed. We're just so desensitized to it that we will walk in a branch and we'll see this lovely poster of a family. They look so happy. And they're like, own your dream house. And you're like, I must be a complete retard not to have a house at 28. Because everybody in the world seems to have it. And then there'll be somebody who will be selling you that home loan. And you're like, yeah, let's go for it because I now own that much. And that's it. You're trapped for 25 years. And somebody made their money and you're now effed. So,
Parth.
So ever since I've started to make a little bit of money, I've started to notice also how there is a generation gap in terms of how we want to spend our money and how, others expect us to spend the money. So since you're talking about houses, one of the first advice that I received was that as soon as I start earning, I should probably reserve some money, to buy a house. So my question is that, how far is this conventional financial wisdom? How far should it influence our own financial decisions? Does it matter? Is it still relevant considering that, things have changed so much, houses are so expensive and, other things have also changed?
I do feel it's smart, Parth, to change with how the world is changing and to just reevaluate the way money is being used and for what. Like genuinely, I think nobody in their right mind in this country particularly should be buying a house before 35. It's wonderful to own your own house and everybody should have their own house. But to do it early on is not the most prudent thing to do because it's just so cheap to rent a house. Like for example, we're in one of the poshest colonies of Delhi. If you were to buy any of these houses, there's no way that any of you can, I can, anybody else perhaps in this room can. But I can assure you that if you were to just pool in money, all of you could happily rent this place. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bedroom unit. Everyone will have this nice, lovely bedroom to yourself. And you will just live like a king and a queen. And it wouldn't be a significant outflow. And you could do that for the rest of your life and never own a house. But there is something about owning a house in our country. So when I make this, let's say, video, which is a very practical video with an Excel sheet and blah, 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 people are like, yeah, but you're not really aware of the practicalities. For example, a lot of people told me, I'm a guy and I'm not going to get married if I don't have a house. Simple as that. Which maybe for us educated people will be like, what the F is that person talking about? But it is a reality for 90% India. That the daughter's family will come in and it's like, yeah, what creds does your son have? Well, he's IIT IIM. Yeah, but does he have a house? No. Well, the next guy does. And that's it. Khatam. Now, you don't argue with that through an Excel sheet. But if you are in a position where you don't have to face any of this, just be smart about your money. Rent out things, because the long-term approximation of that is far lesser than the ownership of it. Use your money to experience life, which we didn't have when we were growing up. But all of you can actually go to a Coldplay concert and have something to remember for the rest of your life. But we didn't have that. We had Appu Ghar, and that was not as memorable. So I'd argue that it's totally okay for you to spend money on things that are just about experience, and in the long term just keep saving for yourself as well, and you don't have to commit yourself to the things that have worked in the past.
So Ankur, what you just said, so basically it's a journey. So my question is, how do we deal with the experiences that money brings? So initially, let's say when I just started working, I'm being purely money minded, because that's what I can see.
Absolutely.
With no experience whatsoever, right? So where do we go from there to being a point where financial success and passion can coexist in harmony? So theoretically, we know how to do that. Every one of us can. But then how do we deal with the experiences while we're not experienced in ourselves?
I feel that the practical way will be to just, and maybe it's a boring answer, but it's just simple budgeting. Like if you earn 100, budget some for your experience, budget some for your desires, budget some for your investing, budget some for your needs, and just stick to that budget. So you know that you have an operating boundary. Here's an example. If you, let's say, do want to go to a Coldplay concert, because that's the experience you want to live, and let's say it's an expensive ticket, but the amount that you save every month towards a desire, you just tell yourself, I now need to save that amount for 6 months before I can afford that Coldplay ticket. And you plan for that. It brings in a certain level of discipline. It brings in a certain level of patience. You learn a lot through that process. You also get what you truly want. And you haven't compromised anything on the other elements of investing or your needs or any of that. That is the prudent, disciplined way of living life. You create boundaries, you operate on those boundaries, and you allow those boundaries to coexist as against just have one of them supersede everything else.
I wanted to kind of push back a little bit,
Sure.
or like personalize what you said right now. For me, I feel like whenever I spend money, like as you said, on things like travel or new experiences that I value a lot, but I feel a sense of guilt doing that. Because, I mean, in the global climate that we live in, the world that we live in, so many horrible things happen. There are people that are struggling all around us on a daily basis. So how is that something that you can balance? Or like, how do I find purpose or do things for myself while also living in a world like this?
The true answer of that, and I do respect where you're coming from, is ask the opposite question. If you were to not do that, is the world getting a better place or not? If you were to truly be all sacrificing and, let's say, helping others, not catering to your needs, but to the needs of others and so on, is it really helping? I'd argue the answer is no. And it's not because you don't matter or that your way of living life cannot influence somebody else's. Is because you're looking at a microcosm of a cause and you believe that you have a significant impact over that. But the reality is, if you were to zoom out and look at the true problem, it's such a meaningful problem that it can only get solved at a governance level or at a really big institutional level. The individual should only spend their time in influencing what they can influence. And I often argue it can never and should never come at the expense of their own happiness. Because then you become bitter. And bitterness is when you, and I'm not saying you become that grumpy old person who's saying, ये दुनिया तो बेकार है, हमारे टाइम पे ये होता था, देखो अब यहाँ क्या हो रहा है, ये सब वगैरह, which doesn't make any sense and does not help anyone, but they're just bitter because they didn't lead their life in the way that they wanted to, and they ended up seeing that all the sacrifice that they made didn't amount to anything either. So always ask the other question. And I often ask this. Like I genuinely say, hey, if I were to take a business class flight I know that there is a carbon footprint that I'm leaving behind which I'm not proud of. If I take an economy class flight, I know that I'm doing something better for this. But if I don't take that business class and instead go for economy, is the world getting better or not? Is that one seat which I am not buying, not getting flown, not getting sold, not getting sat on? Is the world collectively deciding, you know what, there is this complete withdrawal of business class appetite and we should just eliminate this class completely and just have more people sit in and go full economy? Or is it the other way around where now flights will be only business class because there's suddenly so much of demand on it? It's not an easy question to answer. It's a very painful question to ask. It almost feels like the wrong question to ask. But I'd argue that there will be points where you making a certain decision actually helps the world and you're better off making those decisions than making a decision where your personal involvement is simply a moral high ground of your ego and it is not embedded in the true change that the world needs.
But by participating, aren't I complicit in this system already? Like by individuals doing or like being in the system, they are furthering it, right?
They are. The question is there something that is helping the other side not further it? For example, everyone has been complicit all these years through generations. Is the world a better place or not? If I were to set aside just the mental health of the world for 1 second, on any parameter that you pick up, any at all, whether it's poverty, whether it's health, whether it is healthcare, whether it is wars, despite what's happening right now, on every metric possible, the world is a better place than it used to be 50 years back. I think what you lose as a perspective, and I just want to give you that, nothing to do with the book, by the way, anymore. The life that all of you live is better than what the richest person on earth had 100 years back. Like, you have no idea how wonderful this shit box makes us feel every day. You have no idea what running water feels like. You have no idea what hot water when you want it feels like. You have no idea that you click and there's a cab that comes your way in 3.5 minutes, grocery gets delivered, your favorite music plays instantly, that you are living a life which the richest person on this planet did not have less than 100 years back. And that is the privilege that we completely find invisible and certainly not the gratitude for it. The world is an factfulness. Please, Ryan Hosling, I forget the name of the author, Factfulness. That's the book you need to pick up. Not just you, everyone here. Please pick up that book. It'll give you a deep insight into how the world has become a far, far, far better place than what we all think it is. हम ना stock market के जैसे behave कर रहे हैं. Sorry, I'm taking way longer for this answer. Stock market every day will make you believe that you're losing money. Because right now, oh shit, ye ho gaya, blah, 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 blah. You just have to zoom out. You just zoom out 10 years and you'll see the graph only upwards. It's not flat, it's not even down, it's just upwards. But if you were to experience it every single day on the screen, you will die of a heart attack. But if you were to just fill that in with money and leave it for 10 years and just go into a coma and just wake up 10 years back, you'll be like, oh wow, the world is so amazing. I just suddenly got 12% year on year for 12 years. I tripled my money. But the daily vagaries of it will make you feel like it's a shitty place to be in. That's exactly what happens on a daily basis. There are people dying, of course, yes. But people dying are far lesser than what they used to be 10 years back, of anything.
Moving on, we wanted to read a passage from your book.
Sure.
And this is something I found very interesting. You say, you can't influence others if you can't influence yourself. You say you'll wake up early, then scroll till 2 a.m. You say you'll go to the gym, then hit snooze. You say you will speak in the meeting, then overthink it till the meeting's over. We all do this. We break tiny promises to ourselves and tell ourselves it doesn't matter. But it does. The voice in your head is your most constant influence. And if you don't listen to your own voice, why should anyone else? If your actions match your words and your words match your values, people feel it, even before you speak. So sometimes the first person you need to convince is you. And I thought this was fantastic. And I wanted to just ask you, we understand that, hey, you know what? Like, for example, I genuinely want to wake up tomorrow morning early, right? And with all my intention, and I don't wake up the next day. I will feel bad, I will judge myself, and the pattern happens again and again. I want to break out of that pattern. How do we actually take that small step? Because, and if you can share your anecdotal experiences on how you conquered those small wins, and I think that is something we will all love to hear and learn from.
Absolutely. I'll give you my real life example itself. I used to wake up around 8 or so, and I realized when I'm waking up at 8, after having come back really late from work the last night, I miss my kids waking up. I miss getting them ready for school. By the time I wake up, they've already left. By the time I come back, they're already in bed. It's just this complete vacuum, and that's the worst way of living like a parent. I certainly don't want to. So I wanted to wake up before they got up, which was around 6. And it took me about 4.5 years to make that journey from 8 to about 4:30, which is when I wake up today. But here's how I made it. The promise that I made was not, I'll get up at 6, because that's a promise I absolutely will not be able to keep for more than 3 days. The promise that I made was, if I wake up at 8 today, tomorrow, for the next 1 week, I'm going to wake up at 7:50. Because that's a far easier promise to keep, and I'm sure I will keep it. And then when I hit 7:50 and it becomes regular, then the next promise is 7:40. Then the next promise is 7:30. The next promise is 7:20. You basically get your body used to something, not be in a hurry, and eventually you will get to your goal without it creating havoc in your life. And you will adapt to it like the way that we all do. And humans are incredible, by the way. I think the most resilient and adaptable organism on planet is the human mind. And we just do not give it enough credit. You think you can't live without food for 24 hours? Try it. You think you can't live without your cigarette or your social media or your alcohol or your parents or your partner and blah, blah, blah for 24 hours? Try it. I'm not encouraging you to try it, but the point is your mind can generally do whatever you set your mind to, should you give it that allowance. So I just make those tiny promises, and that's the key. It's tiny promises. Keep them. Your brain gets that reinforcement. And the next thing you know, which maybe over some time, you're hitting the goal that you want to. So today, I wake up without an alarm between 4:30 and 5 every day, irrespective of when I sleep. Even if I sleep at 1 a.m., which I rarely do, but even if I were to, I will automatically get up between 4:30 and 5 because my body is just used to doing that for now several years.
So even breaking down the smaller goals.
Absolutely. Just tiny promises to keep. It's not like, I'll write the book. No, not that promise. I'll write every day. I'll write a page every day. Start with that. Make it 2, make it 3 pages. In a year, you will have the book. It'll just come out of its own.
You know, we were talking about influence, and what I wonder about sometimes is that there is so much influence in this world now, right? You have something that existed many years ago, which is your parents, right? That has not changed. But you chronically exist on the internet, right? I think you're the best person to answer this question. When there is so much influence, so many people telling you what to do, how do you truly know what your own influence is and should be to yourself?
That's a terrific question. I think early on, and I often say this, I do not envy your generation at all. In fact, I feel really sorry for your generation. And the honest answer is because you do have it really hard. Really, really hard. When, to your point, we were growing up, our sphere of influence were kids from school, kids at home. That's it. So when our parents said, usko dekho wo kya kar raha hai, we actually knew who our parents were talking about. But today, they may just send you an Instagram post ki, you know, here's a 12th grader CBSE ke result aaye hain. They got 99.9% and what have you done with it? Like I was just speaking to somebody from my colony. Her daughter just graduated from class 12th and I was asking her, how did she do? And she was like, terrible. I was expecting like 60%. She's just scored 91%. I like, my life. So, but the truth is she's not going to get into any DU college. even a 91%. Like she got 91% things right. And for the 9% that she didn't, for whatever reason, she's not going to make it to a North Campus college and blah, blah, blah. Haan, Deshbandhu evening mein ho jayega, but that's it. The influence is just unreal right now. And I wouldn't even call it positive influence. So here's how I think about it. Number one, I would actually, and this is almost like selfish, I will almost always unfollow or not follow anybody who makes me feel bad about who I am. Who makes me feel like I'm not good looking, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not rich enough, blah, blah, blah. They're basically just provoking. They're constantly telling you, you're not good enough, you don't have this, you don't have that, blah, blah, blah. And I will never follow that. Those could be family, those could certainly be individuals who are outside of the gamut. And I will almost always, by that same measure, follow people who are optimistic and positive. They have this vibrance, they have this enthusiasm, they make me feel like there is something to look forward to. And I will consciously feed that. Because the best thing is the algorithm is your slave. It is your absolutely best slave possible. You give it the signal and within 5 minutes, it will respond. So if you tell it, I need shitty things to just numb myself at the end of a really long day, it will give you the shittiest things in the world out there. And if you tell it, no, I, despite having the long day, need me to be reinforced by positive, optimistic, healthy content, it will give you that in 5 minutes because it doesn't have any dearth of it. It simply needs the signal coming from you. So you have to be smart to recognize that it is your slave. Because if you allow it, it will just absolutely topple. Science is really clear on this. We gravitate towards things that titillate us. We gravitate towards things that provoke us. The negative supersedes the positive 5:1 on an average. So even if, for example, I have my videos and people will be writing comments, oh my God, you're so good, you go, so you go that, and one will be like, you, that will hold 5x more weightage than any other positive thing that is applauding me for that. That's just the way our human brain is rewired because we are told over millions of years to be watching out for the negative because that ensured our survival. And now it's just manifesting into how we perceive that content. So you have to go and consciously chase positive content.
And you think doing that will help one recognize what they want their influence to be on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what you get when you consume healthy, good quality content, just like you consume good, healthy diet for your body, you begin to realize what parts of it are working for you and how. But it starts with a very basic thing. You feel good about yourself. So when people start going to the gym, they don't even know the science of it. They don't know the physiology of it. But if you ask them, they're like, I feel good. Because people are saying you're looking good, and I feel good, and I feel healthy, and I feel fresh and all that. And it's only a matter of time before they realize, oh, it's the protein and not the fat. Oh, it's the muscle and not the cardio, blah, 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 blah. But those are just details that come much later. In the beginning, it's just this feeling of I feel good. That's the same thing you want to do with your content as well. I just feel good after spending time on whatever platform it is. And Instagram is not shitty. YouTube is not shitty. Your algorithm is shitty because you've made it shitty. And you have to recognize that. You are the owner of it. They don't have anything against you. They simply want you to get addicted. It's your choice whether you want to get addicted to good or bad content.
Imani?
So you have mentioned that influence is based on goodwill, integrity and authenticity. Let's say that being authentic can make you unpopular or misunderstood. So in such cases, one should adapt to maintain influence or to stay authentic?
No, change the location. Absolutely change the location. It's like a relationship. It's the same thing that we were discussing. If you set a boundary and you're rejected, it's the wrong relationship. So if you're authentic and the person or the environment or the context rejects you, it's not the right place. And more so in professional settings, by the way, because professional settings are living organisms in my experience. They have a culture. DeKoder has a culture. And that culture will not be written on any wall. There'll be no poster. You'll just feel it every day in the way that it works, in the way conversations are held, in the way feedback is given, in the way feedback is received. All of that is the felt experience, the lived experience. And if your authenticity forces you to become somebody else in that experience, then it's virtually impossible to change the environment. And the question is, should you change yourself or you change the environment that you're in? And I'd argue, don't change yourself, change the environment, because there's no dearth of new environments. Unless, of course, this is something that is critical for you or your existence. And that's why it goes back to the same thing, that most resentful people are the ones who crushed their own selves. They lost themselves in trying to win over somebody else, their bosses, their partners, their parents, whosoever. Because they didn't change the environment, they just changed themselves.
In your book, you've written a bit about how in order for influence to work, you have to actually understand a person and not try to convince them of what your goal is. And then also a bit about how maybe it is a bit of a manipulation, or like it is a form of manipulation. So what I wanted to ask is, on a daily basis, how can I actually incorporate that, or like build the instinct that, okay, if someone is talking to me, how do I make them hear me or hear what I have to say?
The question that helps me a lot is, what is it that they know that I don't? It starts with the assumption that nobody in the morning gets up and says, I want to destroy your life today. Okay. Nobody cares. Their life is as it is hard. So if I find myself in resistance, or in conflict with somebody, let's assume that it's not because they hate me. It's because their worldview in some way has conditioned them to behave in this way. And I need to understand that worldview, because that's the only way I can understand this point of view. So the question you would ask is, what is it that they know that I don't? So here's a good example. And I'm only saying this because it could be applicable here. I'm not suggesting it is. You often find editorial and sales at loggerheads with each other. Because editorial is like, we're the purist, we're the independent voice, we're the ones that want to say what needs to be said. The sales one is like, bro, तुम्हारी salary, मेरी salary, सबकी salary, advertiser से आती है. They want to say this. So let's get to a point of view. Now imagine if that is the conflict, and you're the editorial, and in front of you is, let's say, somebody from sales, and you're like, this needs to go out, and they're pushing. At some point of time, you'll be convinced that they just hate you. But they have nothing against you. They have nothing against editorial as well. They're just doing their job. And their job is, I have to keep my advertisers at bay so that they keep paying, so that we keep earning as a business. So you can be on your own moral high ground, but you please understand where I'm coming from. And if you refuse to understand that, I'm not saying that you're wrong or right, but if you refuse to understand where they're coming from, there's no way that you'll ever be able to convince them. Ever. Because they're like, ये तो सुन ही नहीं रही है. ये समझ ही नहीं है कि मैं कहाँ से आ रहा हूँ. But if you're like, okay, I understand. Is it because X brand, who is one of the top paying brands on our platform, will be uncomfortable with this piece going out? Is that why you are behaving this way? And you're like, thank God. Now do you see it? Like, theek hai. If this is the problem, let's try to solve this together. Because now it's not against you and me, it's us versus the problem. And suddenly you will have them handshaking you, and you could hopefully solve that problem. As against sales wale to hote hi aise.
Ankur, a final big theme that we wanted to talk to you about is around hard conversations and being authentic. You come from a humble background, you say, and you always had a dream. You wanted to go to the US, you wanted to do PhD, and you wanted to work at NASA. For a decent amount of time, a lot of that was happening, right? You did go to the US on full scholarship. You were pursuing a PhD in physics. And then you said that I had hard conversations with myself and I chose to walk out. And I think that shows courage. And at the same time, it made you an authentic person. We wanted to understand, what were those hard conversations? Because a lot of us go through that, right? And the first thing you think about is, what will our parents say? Log kya kahenge? All of that comes to your mind. So what are those hard conversations that give you courage and eventually lead to that authenticity?
Now, I wouldn't give myself as much credit as I seem to have when you narrate this incident. I'll tell you what the facts were. The facts were, I was really good with what I was doing. I was top of my class in the PhD program. I was doing something that I always wanted to do. It was my dream. There was no force at any level. This was completely my choice. My parents were convinced this is the absolute best orbital shift in our lives. But what I realized is that I was not happy doing what I was doing. I was like this complete dead soul who used to get up every day, go to class, give my exams, stop the exams, come back home, sleep, repeat. And at that point of time, the question that I asked myself was, hey, if I'm not happy doing something, what's the likelihood that I'll be really good at it? And my intuitive mind told me, not that I had any experience with that, is the likelihood is really low, because if you're not happy doing something, how could you possibly do it for a really long while and hope to be really good at it? And I really wanted to be the best at what I do. So if I imagine myself as a NASA scientist, I was like, I have to be the best NASA scientist that NASA's ever had. But that most likely will not be possible if I'm not happy doing it. But what made it truly easy is I was on a 100% scholarship. Because frankly, if I had my own money or my parents' money invested in that, I can assure you that decision would perhaps not have happened as easily as it did. But I had nothing to lose except for time. And at 22, I didn't feel that I'd lost any time because I had that confidence that I can recover from it somehow, whatever way it is. But I just need to make this decision where I should be doing something that I am actually happy with and not being forced to do, at least by my own merit. So the hard conversation was simply this question: if I'm not happy, what's the likelihood that I'll be really good at it? And the answer seemed to be no, 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 no. And thankfully the context was that I hadn't put in my own money, so it made it really easy. It was extremely tough facing my parents. It was extremely tough facing the world, because this is 2004 that I'm talking about. Nobody in their right mind was dropping out of education. Today, when I speak to kids and they're like, I've dropped out, they're like, oh my God, that's so cool, because everybody successful has dropped out of something, so you must be really cool too. But back then it wasn't. It was suicidal. And my parents were absolutely convinced this would be the worst decision of my life. And it's not that I had that confidence or the foresight that it would be a great decision. I'm just a survivor where it worked out. And this is classic survivorship bias, where you're sitting in front of somebody who just lived to tell the tale. I could have very well just completely sunk and gone into oblivion, and nobody would have heard of me, least of all me. But I'm just grateful that things worked out. It's stemmed with a simple question: if I'm not happy, will I be ever the best at it?
Amazing. We'll take one quick question before we get to the rapid fire. Parth, why don't you ask a question?
Yeah, so I just want to bring in the elephant in the room into the conversation, which is AI. Right? AI has impacted our lives in a big way. It has almost changed our entire life. All of us, to some degree or the other, we have cognitively offloaded a lot of things, significant or insignificant, to AI, sometimes with a sense of guilt. Now, my question is that how do we, in order to pursue or to cultivate our own mind, our own thoughts, independent thinking, how do we distinguish between tasks that we can delegate to AI and tasks that we should not delegate to AI? Or should we just say that we should not delegate at all, we should just think on our own, do on our own?
Sure. That's a great question, Parth. So I'll give you my two sides to it, at least the way that I'm using AI, because I do use it actively. Number one is, don't use AI to create, use AI to elevate. What I mean by this is, you have to do the hard work first yourself, and then you have to use AI to elevate that work. So in your case, let's say it's editorial, you would write your own piece, you will write it through your own raw input, your caliber, your capability, your understanding. And then you would use AI as an assistant, as a tool to elevate the quality of it. Not by saying, redraft it to provoke sentiments of X and emotions of Y, blah, blah, blah. But saying, hey, this is my piece. Here's my objective. Here's my target audience. Give me feedback on how far or close I am to achieving that. And it will give you feedback. Then you work on that feedback. You put it up again, keep doing this. At some point of time, you will get to that point. So don't use AI to create, use AI to elevate, number one. Number two, what I find most fascinating about AI, and most of you will not recognize this because of no fault of yours, just because you're all born very recently, is I come from a time where to study, to learn anything used to be insanely hard. Because you had to go to a library, very few of which existed. You had to then dig into encyclopedias, which were almost always booked out. You then had to navigate through pages and felt like a complete duffer because most of it just went over your head. You had no two-way communication. It was always one way. It was always thrown at you. You had teachers who were mostly uninspiring and did not know anything beyond the syllabus. and you didn't have any other avenue for you to get the exposure that you needed to get your hands dirty on a particular subject. Today, if you had to upgrade yourself in any discipline, you could technically do it with 2 to 3 hours of concentrated work, just by jamming with AI, just by making it the tutor, the guide, the mentor, the teacher, and you getting exposed to a whole new degree of learning and understanding at your fingertips. Literally, when you're taking the metro ride from home to work and back over maybe a 2 to 3 day period. That's unprecedented. And you cannot allow that to go to waste. So my best use case of AI is my learning velocity. My learning velocity at the age of 45 is faster than it has ever been. And I'm consuming not at the surface, I'm digging in deep because I have the ability to do that. So I often ask this question to students when I go to attend colleges or school. How many of you are actually more curious than you were because of AI? More often than not, the answer is not so much because they don't know how to measure that curiosity. If you were to ask me that question, I think I am, if not, then at least 100 times more curious than I was 5 years back. Because now nothing is outside of my scope or realm of understanding. मैं कुछ सड़क पे देखता हूँ and I'm like, hey, tool name, why is this happening? And I'm speaking to mostly voice, like I'm not typing and blah, blah, because this is natural language. So, hey, why is this happening? Why is that happening? I've learned so much about India in the last 3 years than I've never before. Like we travel, and before we travel, कोई Lonely Planet होती थी पहले, फिर कोई और किताब होती थी. अब तो यही है, like, give me the history of this place. सब कुछ बता देगा वो. And then you're clicking a photograph. We were there at the Kailasa temple in Ellora, which by the way is a masterpiece. If you think Taj Mahal is the shit, you haven't seen anything. Incredible piece of work. And I'm literally clicking एक चीज, like कोई random Vishnu का अवतार की एक फोटो खींच रहा हूँ. Like, can you please explain that? And I'm getting PhD theses on it. And like, this is insane. This is truly insane. So use AI to elevate your learning velocity. And I think these two. But if you outsource your thinking, you're absolutely right. It's the death trap. That's when it's just downhill from there, because anybody who's doing that is just cognitively dependent, like the way we are on social media for our entertainment.
Finally, Ankur, they have a list of rapid fire questions to ask to you. I can see it's a plethora of questions, so I will quickly hand it over to Gayatri for her set of questions, and then we'll quickly go around the room.
That's good.
Okay, so I wanted to start with something that you've gotten wrong in life and it took you years to unlearn.
Money. Money, hands down. For the first 32 years of my life, I was just so badly ill-advised about money.
Okay, a part of the version of yourself that you were in your 20s that still lives inside you today.
I think the scientist in me has not died. Still, like I still love the sciences. Maybe I'll get a PhD. Somebody will give me an honorary doctorate.
And my last one is, can everyone really be an entrepreneur?
No. And shouldn't attempt to as well. I think entrepreneur, it is certainly a learned skill. It is not something which is born. But not everyone should be an entrepreneur because it is a very different DNA. And if you're not that DNA, it's totally okay.
Okay, so my set of question is, one thing that people should protect at all costs.
One thing that people should protect at all costs. I think your respect towards your own self. How do you see your own self? Because if that image gets destroyed, it's really hard to build that back.
One thing your 25-year-old self misunderstood.
How important people and relationships are. I thought money is the most important thing.
Okay, so the last one, this might be the one. So one thing that loneliness has taught you so far.
That I am my best friend. And I really don't need anybody else. I'm grateful to have people around me. But I am the best possible friend that I can have for myself.
Vrinda.
Most overrated self-help advice.
Find your passion. I don't even know what that means. It's almost like वो carpet के नीचे छिपा हुआ है, ढूंढ लो, sofa के पीछे है, कहीं ढूंढ लो. You basically grow your passion. You discover your passion. You don't find it.
Is self-help a privilege?
It is certainly a privilege because at some point, like the Maslow's hierarchy, if you don't have your base covered, then self-help is like way too top for sure.
One investment every 25-year-old should make right now.
They should just start an SIP. It's as simple as that. Just get financially disciplined about investing money every month.
One thing, young people overthink too much.
What the world is thinking about them. All of you are constantly thinking about what the world is thinking of you. And the truth is nobody's thinking about you.
One thing, ambition destroys if unchecked.
Something that ambition destroys?
If goes unchecked.
I think it may end up destroying relationships because you feel that success is more important than the relationships you have.
And one thing people mistake for confidence.
The volume or clarity with which you speak. In fact, you know what? And it's ironic I say this, but for the longest time I've always felt it. Your ability to speak in English. That itself. And people mistake that a lot with clarity, confidence, and conviction to a great extent. We were still colonized.
What is one thing that signals emotional maturity?
Your ability to regulate your emotions.
What is something that we should not tolerate at all?
I think we should tolerate everything, yeah. Because that allows us to understand what is worth tolerating and what not. I really don't have anything that... people will say you should not tolerate anybody stepping on you, criticizing you, abusing you, hurting you, blah, blah, blah. I think all of those are really important ways to discover what's truly important for you or not. So my answer is nothing.
So finally, what is something that even success cannot compensate for?
I think people around you, how much they love you, how much they care about you, because your success has no bearing on that.
All right, I think that wraps up our show. Ankur, any parting thoughts? Thank you so much for joining us.
I loved it. Thank you so much. This interaction was so much different from what I've been used to. Thank you for sparing your time. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as an author, I get